Well, thank you, gentlemen. I'd really just like to start off with really just asking you each to introduce yourselves, and then perhaps answering the question, well, we heard some really tremendous application stories. Are there any there that you'd like to amplify upon or expand upon, or are there others that we might have should have heard about today? So who wants to go first? John.
I'll go first. Is this working? Okay. So what Mohammed was talking about and the others is we're talking about installing a smart infrastructure. We're talking about putting them in the lights to control the lights. And he was mentioning that we do a great job with that. But the key is we want to put in a smart infrastructure that will allow us to use that data at a later date if we don't want it now. So what we're doing is we're installing upgradable systems that we can install so that we can always go back later and do what we need to do, even if we can't do it today.
John, you're getting ahead of yourself.
Sure.
Who are you with?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm John Romano. I'm with Enlighted. We're a edge-based sensor network that we put in the lights. Sorry.
Great. Matt, go ahead.
I'm Matt Willenbrink. I'm EVP of Sales and Marketing at Fybr. We are a 20-year-old IoT smart city solution providing company. Lighting is one of our newest verticals. We began with smart parking. We've been doing lighting for about 3 years now. And to your point, having the infrastructure upgradable on devices that are going to live on these poles for 10 plus years is critical. We don't know what's going to happen in 10 years with the technology. So trying to future-proof these devices on hard infrastructure that cities typically only replace every 20, 25 years is a real challenge. We take a little bit different approach really quick, and then I'll hand it over to him. When we developed our solution, we came at it from a slightly different approach. Coming from parking, creating ultra-low power devices was critical. So having power at the pole was something we didn't really care about, and developed our solution with ultra-low power in mind and tried to develop an infrastructure-free solution.
Hi, everyone. Martin Mercier from Signify, formerly known as Philips Lighting. Hopefully you'll stay that way for a couple of years. So I've been a product manager for systems, now solar lighting as well, for Americas, including projects in Brazil. Yeah, so maybe to add to what, well, actually answer the question, Jim, I'm going to go with an example for parking garages. We're talking about sensors, advanced technology, but 10 years ago, we connected lighting garages fixtures, and one of the first project was about having motion sensor working together, so Zigbee mesh network and sensors, and it was about energy saving, not much about gunshot detection as an example or advanced sensing, and we're basically connected to that dashboard, gave the customer the key to look at it, and at one point in time, like 2 weeks later, he called us, hey, I'm pretty happy about energy savings, all that stuff. Can I get like a printed report of the up and down within the garages so I can see the cars coming in and out and people walking by? And we had basically infrared technology, so it was pretty basic. So, well, we'll give it to you, hopefully help you with improving your schedule and all that type of stuff, and they like harvesting. Came back later, hey, can I get a dump of all the data in a CVS kind of file? Okay, CSV kind of file, CSV kind of file. Said, right, did it. Sent us back graphics of the usage. He said, you know what? We just realized, the maintenance team looked at the data and realized that it was a pattern going up and down the garage, like a Z pattern. Said, okay, good. So, yeah, but that pattern is the maintenance going up and down. It's third party we hired a couple of months ago. And said, well, that's great. Well, the pattern disappears some nights and we don't see it. So we realized the third party wasn't coming to do the security rounds. So that was one application or one feature we gave the customer for free. So just to give some ideas, sometimes it doesn't need a high level sensor. It's just about listening and understanding the needs. So we could give the other customers that kind of feature of reproducing patterns and understanding if someone's lost in the garage or something going up and down for no reason, vandalism kind of thing.
Hey, that's great. Can any of you, can you comment on, here we are with the ARC Advisory Group Annual Conference, and we have a Digital Transformation Council, and digital transformation really has three pillars. One is the technology refresh. A second is that new technology often allows you to change your business processes, but none of those matter if the culture of your organization doesn't embrace those other two changes. Have all of you found that to be a foreboding issue? Go
I'll
ahead.
go first. Yes is the short answer. I mean, having been in this business for 20 years, we've seen the smart city trend ebb and flow. It was fairly popular 15 years ago, 10 years ago. But then there was sort of a backlash where everyone knew they wanted it, but no one knew how to pay for it. No one knew how to deploy it or what technology was correct. Unfortunately, I think all of us up here have customers that are in the government sector, which are notoriously difficult to work with. From the sales cycle, it's incredibly long, and politics changes the landscape fairly often, which makes it always kind of a moving target. I think within the last 2 or 3 years, and even the last 18 months, we've really begun to see the mentality shift, where most cities and municipalities are really beginning to see that this is a technology or a trend that can really benefit their communities and provide them not only cash positive benefits, but citizen benefits, economic benefits, and make their cities better. And they're actually beginning to hire people that are empowered to make those changes.
Mhm.
That's new.
Yeah, breaking down the silos too.
Yes.
It's a big plus. I think we have to get better again. I mean, from a manufacturer standpoint, it's selling the value of what we can do, cutting down all the technologies that they don't understand. IT stuff. I think it goes back to the value. So and the citizens around it. It's mostly about citizens and people being happy in the city. So then from there you can get to all the different things that can help traffic flow and inside outside as well for cars and parking lot spacing optimization kind of thing. So yeah.
So we're mostly concerned with the indoor sensing of things, and we collect a tremendous amount of data. We're a granular system. We have a sensor in every single light. And what we're finding is that these customers are getting tremendous amounts of data, and they're getting tremendous amounts of analytics, but nobody has made the decision to do anything with that. So in a space utilization opportunity, we might sell a building's only 12% occupied at any given time. And the customer will say, I don't really care, it's my building, I'm not changing anything. So if they're willing to put the investment in for this data, and they're not willing to make a actionable item with the data, there's no use. I mean, there's no value if they're not willing to make the change.
Thanks, John and Matt and Martin. I think I hear two overlapping issues here. One is the one that I posed that leading question, that sure enough, culture is a big issue, whether you're in a public or private organization. I know because of my work in the smart city and public domain world, that differs from the private world because there are many, many groups of stakeholders that often have competing needs, and it's tough to achieve consensus and write your spec and all of that. But that was great insight. With that, do we have any questions out there from the attendees? Anthony?
Actually, I have some for Mohammed.
Go ahead. Go ahead. Ask the question.
So, Mohammed, when you said some of your lamps and retrofits, if they're not PoE, what wireless technology are you using in those lamps to connect the sensors back to the network?
So those sensors,
Give the mic.
so currently those sensors are getting powered by the 0 to 10 volt drive and relaying information back and forth. That's currently how it's being done. So as far as PoE, it is something that's being driven not only in the marketplace, but with us as a manufacturer, and that's as well as color tuning. That's something that's very in the front of mind, so to say, and will be here very soon.
In the form of asset tracking, you mentioned, what wireless technology protocol
Okay, so that we do through one of our premier partners, Enlighted, and I would let John speak to that a little
Sure.
bit more. Appreciate it.
So the asset tracking we do, we basically developed it mostly for the healthcare industry because they're very familiar with real-time location. The unit we have has got a Bluetooth radio. It's a transceiver and it's a transmitter and a receiver. For the retail applications, wayfinding, we use it as a transmitter, but for the real time where we're tracking assets, we use it as a receiver. So where there's a Bluetooth tag that sends out the signal and we triangulate on the tag with the sensors.
Okay, well, gentlemen, particularly for John and Martin, your lighting organizations are transitioning, and I know your organizations are developing somewhat vertical platforms for certain applications. And you talked, I think you mentioned healthcare. We heard supermarkets earlier. Maybe we start with Martin. I know that you have a few focus areas that Signify works upon. What are they?
Yeah, well, indoor and outdoor. So in my role, I'm overlapping with the two. But yeah, obviously, healthcare is a good segment. Asset tracking is definitely something interesting for us as well. Similar technologies. Retail, for different reasons. We had done some case studies to try to understand what can bring customer to stores, and depending of using lighting actually to do dynamic lighting. That was a step one. That was a good improvement for the retailers. So we started looking at dynamic lighting within stores. Then once you get into the store, trying to follow their path, trying to understand which aisles is more popular than other. And then the back room, improving lighting quality just to help them to, put their clothes on and see how it looks like. That's an example. Industry, obviously industry is going through the transformation as well with IoT. So we're trying to help them to, asset tracking is also, it's also in industry. If we get to outdoor, and all of this, those platforms, if you will, we started as all separate entities as a company. So we had a lot of exciting technology not connecting together. So that was the bulk of my work 5-7 years ago, trying to connect these platforms, mostly because I was both indoor and outdoor, and trying to get a building connected to this parking lot. So from a lighting industry, it was already a challenge for us within the company. So imagine for other lighting systems or other industries. So to get the outdoor, public on street parking lots, I'm seeing the same thing. So last 2-3 years, we realized, not only me but the company, another company, that we need to accelerate that, making sure platforms gets together and connects. So I spent big part of my time working on standards, partnership at the beginning, but it became partnership programs and then standards that'll be released this year. Well, last year there was a few as well that were released and updated, and next year to connect those platforms. As an example, if you take retail, why not connecting the parking lot to that retailer to help their curbside services? And it goes beyond lighting, obviously. So one of the things we're working on is receptacles. We mentioned before that it's easy when you can remove and put back new technology. It's stupid. It's just a piece of plastic with pins in there, right? But that's key. That's really key for our customers, making sure that the 25 years or 15, 25 years lifespan, that they will be able to update, whatever you call it, platform or hardware. So all of these, I'm not sure I'm answering your question actually, but all of these,
It's fine.
all of these verticals, if you will, are needs to connect somehow, and this is important not only for us manufacturers to enable more technology out there, but also for customers mostly.
That's great. Matt, my personal interest, I come to this from the transportation domain. So connected vehicles and intelligent transportation systems are near and dear to my heart, as they also are to our transportation analyst, Edward Fiddler. So can you, your comments were quite brief about how Fybr got to the lighting world. Can you tell us a little bit about what was Fybr, what's the legacy business, and how did you get to this lighting, and
Sure.
And do connected vehicles impact this at all?
Most definitely. Vehicles and transportation are kind of at the heart of everything smart city related. As I mentioned before, Fybr, we began in the late 90s as a vehicle detection parking company. And up until about 5 years ago, that was our prime product, was a wireless parking sensor. So, in about 2012, we changed almost everything in the company, changed management. We fired everyone but 2 people and started over. With that, we redeveloped our entire platform. And when we did that, we kind of had the blue ocean of what we wanted to do and what we wanted the platform to be. So with that, we abstracted out all of the really hard pieces that we had learned, low power, putting a parking sensor in the ground and getting it to last for 10 years on battery power alone is a monumental feat, especially when it has to talk through RF. So learning that, and then making sure it's obviously secure and has a way to talk back to the back end in a manner that couldn't be hacked or as hack-proof as possible, and still allowed for us to do over-the-air updates and not brick devices. So we took all of those learnings and then abstracted it into a platform that we could then apply to any vertical we wanted to. So then we began looking at what are the most important verticals to municipalities. I'll say communities. That's our favorite word, because instead of cities, communities, a corporate campus could be a community, a university could be a community, a hospital could be a community. They all have the same infrastructure and the same challenges that cities have, just on smaller scale. So, taking all of those learnings, we started looking at what are the verticals that were the most important to those communities. Lighting was actually the second one that we looked at. And it was a fairly light lift for us once we had a ultra low power communication platform in place, essentially. Putting lighting controllers and real-time utility grade metering into each device was a fairly light lift for our engineering team. So we took that and then applied it to a few other verticals as well, environmental monitoring and water monitoring and management as well.
Fascinating. So connected vehicles are a piece of that?
Connected vehicles are a little different. They are a piece of it, and the information we provide is one piece of that platform. There's two real factors to our solution where it makes it unique and different than a lot of other ones, or even the 5G technologies, is we are ultra low power and ultra low data rate, essentially. So we're never going to stream video over our solution. We do provide information that is important to connected vehicles, but not at the same level as cameras or some other pieces of technology.
So to all three of you, so what's in the future for IoT and smart lighting? We've been at it for at least 5 years, or maybe 10 in some cases. What happens next? Does anyone want to take that? Martin, go ahead.
Well, no, I guess too much to say, but yeah, it's so interesting, right? Looking at, and then somebody mentioned before, 15 years ago, I think you mentioned that it was a bubble that was so exciting, and then we realized, oops, it's not that easy, and then it's expensive for what it is, right? And somebody on a podcast I heard lately, hey, IoT didn't pick up speed at lighting yet. So we're just starting, but there's so many things happening. Enlighted did a lot in the past years to actually create platforms and enable IoT into lighting. So first of all, I think we need to, as I mentioned before, being better at creating the value, or maybe explaining the value to our customers down to the detail of the level they can understand, right? If I take the outdoor example, obviously vehicle-to-grid communication, that's a good example. How we can be out there with lighting, we're everywhere in the city, as mentioned before, in a great position, height, and location to create a mesh. Not necessarily mesh to Zigbee, but it could be a mesh of sensors. It could be different technology, but well-positioned to sense, well-positioned to give back information to citizens. Out of that, we can do a lot. We can help them. I'll give you an example with acoustic sensors. We, lighting industry, can be there and sense and understand by sounds what's going on within the city. Traffic jams, vehicles that are not supposed to be on that street, different traffic patterns that happen over the years that you can improve your road maintenance. Think out of the box here. There's a lot of examples. Unfortunately, accidents where you need to alert authorities. We all think that 911 is super efficient, but sometimes, a lot of time actually, they get lost understanding what's going on and where. So by the sound, you can detect, is it a car accident? Is it a building-related accident? Or is it a pole? Or is it just two cars that, got into together? So you can detect activities and inform on the spot or later on for future improvement in the city or the authorities. Pollution, air quality is becoming a hot topic in U.S. as well. Other countries, we heard a lot about it, but in the U.S. it's becoming a topic too. So how we can detect and understand where it's coming from, and give back, to the authorities, and and weather data as well. So we kind of think that the weather is overall city, but it's different pockets of weather activities. So we can pick that up. So it goes back around. I mean, it used to be about connected lighting for many years. Now I think we're getting to the sensors, how much we can add to that network that we've built up. Even if there's a small portion of lighting have connectivity at this point in time, but it's predicted it's going to go up to 30% within 10, 15 years. How we can leverage that.
Very true. When we think about the smart city, it's not only these urban areas, but it is some undeveloped parts of the world. And some of the advantages of lighting and controlled lighting are quite dramatic, although they might not be obvious to those of us sitting here in Orlando, Florida. There's one anecdote from a colleague of ours that tells a story about how he sold some solar streetlights in Africa. And he sold a few, didn't think much of it. But then the children in town started doing their homework under the solar streetlight. So they decided to add wireless communication so that they can control the light so it was on very bright, well above its IES recommended guidelines, for 2 hours after sunset. So the kids really could do their homework. And then they ramped it down so that they had enough extra power to run it the next day or after a couple of days. So then a satellite internet provider appears and says, you've got enough extra power that I can run a satellite internet connection there on this thing. So now kids in Africa who don't even have power in their city can go and charge some kind of tablet, get the internet, and do their homework under a streetlight. So, that whole smart city domain is not just flying cars in New York City and hyperloops and all of that. It also goes down to people that are underrepresented as well.
Or to that point, we have a really quick anecdote from one of our sales team members who used to be a former Philadelphia cop. This is a use case for intelligent lighting that exists right now with probably all of our controllers up here. He said when he was a cop, a lot of times they would do raids on drug houses. And they'd usually do them, 4 in the morning, 5 in the morning, right before sunrise. And they would usually try to coordinate with the utility companies to come and shut the lights off so that the SWAT team could go in under darkness. Most of the time, the utility companies didn't show up to turn the lights off, so they carried 22 rifles with them to shoot out the lights if they needed to do a raid and they couldn't get the lights turned off. With intelligent lighting, if they have a button and they can turn them off, think of the maintenance and just utility costs of just replacing broken fixtures from these small, simple use cases. The difference that can mean for cities. That's really low-hanging fruit and stuff that can happen
and
today.
I think that's really the challenge, because as the legacy lighting OEMs are here and many others have faced really a chasm in their business models, because instead of supplying something every 2 and 3 years and touching it and getting on a bucket truck or up to change something, now it's 10 years, and they may go 20. So that's a big challenge, a challenge. But on the other hand, you now have, 700 milliwatts at a streetlight that you could do something with. What do you want to do with it? What do we want to do with it? That undoubtedly is the question.
Yeah, I like the example of the solar example, because you get into task tuning with an outdoor light. It's something we talk about in commercial office space, but now you're talking about outdoor, and because of connectivity, you can do that. Task tuning for the kids doing their homework, right? And then safety light for the rest of the night. So that's a great example of.
Yeah, I mean, there's and while I give this one anecdote, I'll ask you to each think up one like this. I know that there are, some cities in North America, and I think I won't call out the city, but it's an older city in the Northeast that has a lot of abandoned buildings. And the fire department, if these houses went on fire, nobody was there to call, maybe even on the whole street. So by that time, 2 or 3 of these row homes would be ablaze. So the city deployed a wireless, it might have been LoRa device, a smoke detector in each abandoned house, and simply billed the property owner some small, tiny amount. And guess what? Now the fire department got to learn when the house was on fire immediately, rather than half an hour when the city block was ablaze. Just brilliant. And who would have thought of it? I asked you guys a question.
All right, so I'll give you an interesting use case that we did have in an outdoor. So we do a lot of car lots.
Okay.
And everybody thinks the car lot wants to be as bright as possible. So what the police have told us is that they don't want it as bright as possible. They want the lights in the back as dim as possible for the whole back of the parking lot because they can see back there. The contrasts are much better. They can see. But more importantly, if there's an occupancy sensor on the back of the parking lot and all of a sudden the cop is driving down the street and he sees a bright light at the back of the parking lot, there's a reason why there's somebody back there. They have a reason to go look at it. And this has actually gone into the retail shopping chains too, and parking garages where they want the lights pretty dim when there is nobody in the space, but they want it on an individual label. So if a person is walking into a parking lot and they see a bright light in the distance, they're cautious. So all of that task tuning is working out as far as a security reason. And it was something we never thought of. Another one that they told us, and I never thought of it ourselves, is in retail chains, they want the lights dimmer at night because it's really uncomfortable to come from a dark outside to a super bright inside. But they will gradually make it brighter as you get closer into the stores, give the eyes a chance to adjust as they come in. So a lot of these task tuning things are coming up and we're not thinking of them. The customers are coming to us saying, hey, this is what we want. That's a great idea. Let's tell everybody else.
Well, I've been remiss because we've got 10 minutes to go, and I have yet to ask about color tuning and adjustable color temperatures and all of that. Who wants to take that one on first?
I'll come close to it.
Sure.
Go ahead. And
yeah,
then we'll go to
no,
Martin, because I know
no.
he knows quite a bit.
Yeah. Color tuning becomes a little more tricky, but the transition from from incandescent to LED obviously has color temperature changes with it as well. We have a university in St. Louis where we're located that just deployed, they thought they were doing good. They changed to LED lighting so that they could, reduce some light pollution and save on energy costs. And they put up the lights and everyone hated them because they thought they were too bright. It was the same wattage of LEDs as before, and all of a sudden the light aesthetically was more daylight balanced and it was much, much brighter. So and they didn't have intelligent lighting controllers on any of these lights, so they spent, another, I think it was just over 6 figures to go back out and have people dim each of these LED lights, manually essentially, and up on a bucket truck.
So let me just ask then of Signify and of Enlighted. Are you a fixture? You're a control system manufacturer.
We're a sensor network that controls the lights.
Okay. So then I'll go to Martin. Just for the audience out there who might be unenlightened, you like that?
Never heard that.
You can source fixtures at different color temperatures, correct? Now, and the world now is also moving towards controllable color temperature, so I can change the color. And what are the reasons why I might want to change my color temperature or my spectrum of color, more spectral power density to be more accurate?
Right. Depending, if you want to change, you might want to change it during the day, to kind of repeat what we're seeing with natural light. If you think about healthcare, unfortunately, some patients won't go outside really often. You might want to reproduce, natural light patterns. So you might want to tune your light, from morning, lunch, and then evening color. So that will be from a warm color to kind of bluish color and warm.
Do lighting colors actually impact the human body in a way that might affect hormones, maybe even melatonin?
From research studies, yes. I didn't experience myself, but well, actually, yes. When I was still based out of Montreal, where I'm from, I bought a blue light from Philips when we were acquired by Philips. I think it worked. I'm not using it down in Austin, Texas anymore, but I think it worked. So I can tell for that part. From a research standpoint, yes, apparently it has an impact on melatonin and all these things, which I don't want to get into because I'm not into the detail of it. But yeah, so from a daily pattern, yes. So healthcare is an example where you might want to do it. If you think about office space, we'll be more and more into urban areas and then more and more within buildings. Opposite to farmers that probably spend a lot of time outside. So you might want to maybe reduce that to office space as well. So color tuning for your employees coming in and out, and sometime even staying in the whole day and even shopping inside, and then spending most of life inside. To the outdoor, there's different reasons, but you might want to change it over time, depending of local rules, local research learnings. Like we started with the high kelvins, which is in the bluish colors, because the LEDs were more powerful at that point. So for outdoor, it was just the beginning of what we could do with LEDs. But then obviously we all realized, not only our customers but even manufacturers, that it was too different from what we had in terms of lighting, and also changing some natural life patterns. So we had to go from what we call kelvins, so 5,000 to 4,000, and now we're getting down to 3,000 for a lot of different customers out there. So that's the reason why. So you might want to tune later, in its case of outdoor, to adapt to natural life patterns, or what you're going to learn along the way. Over time, over 5, 10, 20 years, I'm not sure. It's a good question. If customer would like to go back, there's probably good cases for that. But
Right. Matt?
Well, I think we'll start to see, I think a couple of people before mentioned some of the use cases for emergency lighting. I think we're going to begin to see alternate forms of tornado sirens coming through lights, whether they flash blue or flash red or different colors. Maybe not just a color shift of the color temperature, but radically different colors from what they normally produce today, to indicate different evacuation routes or different emergencies.
No,
It's an alternate form of
that's very true. I'm from South Florida, and we have an epidemic of people driving up the highway entry ramps the wrong way.
Mm-hmm.
And many of those ramps now have red lights that if you're going the wrong way, they will blink at you, like in a Star Trek kind of way.
Wrong way.
The color changing, the adjustable spectral power density is not only for humans. I mean, it does arguably impact your melatonin levels, which is a cancer suppressant, makes you more alert. Some of the Major League Baseball stadiums are very blue because they want the players to be as alert as they could possibly be. But also flora and fauna. There's quite a bit of research and lawsuits about roadway lighting and its impact on farmers, and particularly soybean fields through many states in the Midwest. I am from Boca Raton, who has one of the world's experts on turtle egg laying, and turtles cannot see light under 2,300 K. So you're free to put up as much red light out there as you want, but they can't see it. And they navigate by moonlight off the water. The beach should be dark, as it has been for millions of years. And the car dealerships in Delray Beach really disorient them, even though it's 5 miles away from where they nest. Well, we got a few minutes. Any last words from all of you gentlemen? Or questions from the audience? Alex.
Yeah, this question is for Martin. A few years ago, Signify did a pilot with City of Los Angeles with smart poles that have Ericsson cellular nodes in them. And the city was going to get like something about $1,200 per light pole. Has that model been used in any other places or expanded? Because if you have a couple 100,000 lights and you switch to smart poles, I mean, that's something like $250 million a year in revenue.
yeah, that was started as a project, and now there's what we call a venture for us, part of Signify. And yes, they're expanding. I mean, they have other cities in California. They've been working with City of San Jose as well. The proposal, it stays the same, to provide better networking for citizens and for the city. So that's still the case. We're going to grow up to 5G shortly, a proposal, and also adding other functionality. So it became a smart pole. So if somebody mentioned smart pole earlier, so beyond the luminaire, right? So having a smart pole with more sensing capabilities. So the offering, if you will, from that company called Bright Sights, it's not only networking and network capability to the city It's also including sensors and getting information inside the network to provide back to the city. It's overlapping a little bit with some of the smart lighting projects that we do. But as you mentioned, the big proposal is having radios inside that will broadcast 4G at this point in time and 5G soon. So yeah, it's going well. Expanding to other countries as well. They're all sort of questions and discussions on certification, standardizations. As anything else, it's technology moving sometimes too fast for standards, but it's going well in general.
All right, do we have any other questions out there? Anthony.
This question's for John. With Enlighten, are your sensors capable to integrate with open platforms or like with Open Niagara framework or BACnet and?
So all the sensors are collecting data. The data is overwhelming. In 5 years, we've collected 13 terabytes of data. What is happening is that data is being processed and it's done through APIs or BACnet. And we're making those APIs available to whoever wants that information, either through the BMS system and the BACnet or the APIs. You asked the question, where's it going? Right now, the data and the APIs, everybody has their own. There's no standard. There is standards being developed. One of the advantages of Siemens purchasing Enlighted is we are learning about these standards. There's one called Haystack, there's one called Brick. And once those standards are established, then sensors from Signify, sensors from anybody will have the same REST APIs to pull that data and use it as it is. So yes, we can put our data, anybody wants it, as long as they can use our APIs to pull that data.
Okay, and when you mention all this data being stored, is it on the customer for them to pay for the storage, or is that something Enlighten stores and then charges the customer for access to the
So
data?
the customers own the data. They own the raw data. They can be stored on the cloud. They can be stored locally, however they want to store their data. What the part that it's charged for is the processing of that data and turning it into usable. I mean, we collect data 65 times a second. You can just imagine how many thousands of bytes of data are generated every second. So the key is to make that a usable piece of data. And that is what the APIs and that is what people pay for, is that analysis. But they have the rights to the data.
Okay, thank you.
Well, let me follow up with Martin on data standards on that same question. What's your insights about data interoperability standards?
Yeah, so there's different levels, right?
Right.
And that totally on board with the APIs. That's the way of opening the platform, if you will, at this point in time for projects. And obviously BACnet is well known to in the backend. But to go back to lighting, right? So, I mean, to the lighting fixture, if I can go even deeper, right? So when it comes to IoT, one thing really important is to be able to share that data. So to your question, one thing that I've been involved directly lately is creating a lighting specific, at this point in time, open platform within the product. So as we mentioned before, having a piece of plastic that is standard to connect sensors and controller is one thing. Having the data standardized within our lighting equipment, if you will, or lighting industry related products, it was another one. And so the last 5 years, there's been work, partnerships between lighting manufacturers to create that platform that will collect the data and share back to a cloud-based system, if you will. So that has been really important, at least for a lot of different manufacturers, but the lighting industry, to make sure that at least between us, we can connect, sensors and controllers, Enlighted, Signify, anybody else, and we can share that data back. And then as an industry, if we standardize the lighting specific portion of it, we can open that to other industries. So from an IoT standpoint, as a specific product, you have to create your own standard. When you go outside of the product, then you have to jump on what's already standardized, right? You don't want to recreate the wheel like a Zigbee mesh network, Bluetooth, 5G. But inside your product, if you're a washing machine, if you're a car, you might want to create an optimized data space, to optimize based on the application. So we're getting, just from a time scale standpoint, we're getting to a point where in 2020, I think most of the standard enabling the platform will be released. Some from ANSI, some are global, including cybersecurity as well, that are based off global standards. But yes, that's enabling at the level, at the edge level, if you will, application, road and street, office space, multiple manufacturers to work together, and different type of sensors. We're not sensors experts, but there are, so we want to get them to the platform as well.
Great, thanks, Martin. Hey, I know we're a few minutes over. Do we have any last questions, or should we call it a day?
Did everyone hear me?
Larissa?
I would like to ask about data anonymization. Do you companies have a preoccupation with the privacy of the data that is collected in your sensors? Because I don't know if in the States you have a general data protection law to protect the privacy of citizens, especially in the public sector, for example, in the cities applications. It is important to guarantee the anonymization of the data.
So who owns the data, and what do you do to protect it for that owner?
All right, I'll start. So we're a German company, so the European standards for privacy are actually crazy, but my office is based in California, which is just as crazy. Yeah. So the privatization of data and what we do with it has become really, really important. We've actually had to cut features out of our system because there is identifiable data that we're doing, even though it's completely anonymous data. A perfect example, a CEO has an office and he's the only one with the key in that office. If I have an occupancy data and I know that CEO is the only one with that key, I can identify when he walked in and when he walked out. So we had to stop doing that. And we have actually people that are in charge of reviewing everything we do with our data to make sure we're not doing anything that will break the privacy laws.
Yeah, also Signify is based out of the Netherlands in Europe, so we get the news in advance, let's say. But yes, I mean, a hot topic. I mentioned sensors, but obviously privacy and cybersecurity, it's next to it within the next years. And I think in our case, as you mentioned before, really clearly, the customer owns the data. Then it's a matter of securing the transfer and communication of data, but the customer owns the data at this point in time. I think it's still open field a little bit, but California is leading the pack for US and in Europe as well, globally, and China to some extent. But it's still open field, and yeah, it needs to get narrowed down and understood better. It's not an easy topic to understand.
And like both these guys up here, we're the same. Privacy is of the utmost concern for Fybr, and the information we collect. We, like your company, most of our sensors don't collect any personally identifiable information. Actually, none of them do. From the standpoint of we don't capture any video, we're not capturing license plates, we're not capturing anything that could recognize a person specifically. There is the tangential information that could be collected to identify people, and we do our best as well to strip that out of the solution. Depends on the customer and their specific needs. We have a policy that we typically do not own the data, our customers own it. That's typically what every city in the United States has been asking for. That's almost a table stakes policy moving forward with most cities.
Okay, any other questions before we call it a day? All right, well, thank you very much, gentlemen. This has been a great session. Thank you for our earlier speakers. This was awesome.